off all by itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
This is one of my latest acquisitions here. It's a World War I German Albatross fighter. It's got a streamlined wood fuselage, and it was a classic airplane in World War I. This thing it's beyond just being an airplane. This thing is a piece of art. They even went back, they found the original nails in Germany. Everything is just reproduced to a very high standard. The cockpit has got some fascinating things in it. It's done exactly the way it was in World War I. Of course, the Germans had their wild paint jobs more so than any of the other Allied airplanes and fighter pilots. World War I airplanes, they had no brakes. They had a tail skid in the back that used to drag in the grass. That actually was their brake, so as long as the tail was down, you could maintain your speed. Now, you know, anytime I get the chance to fly these things, I can't help but imagine what it must have been like back then when, you know, they were just kids basically flying them 18, 19 years old, you know, going out on an airfield not knowing what was going to happen, that particular mission. Must have been a very interesting time.
Preparation for a flyby is somewhat involved. One example of a race was last Memorial Day. We opened the race at Concord, which because of sequestration, military is not able to do the flybys. So the warbird community has stepped up and making the flybys really something special, and I think the fans are enjoying it and realizing what the community has to offer. They often do this, you know, at their own expense for their own enjoyment, and especially when it's a tribute to the veterans, you can see all the warbird owners step up. The TSA, there are flight restrictions around most racetracks because there are large assemblies of people. So we have to submit the qualifications of the crew. They do background checks. We have passport numbers that we have to submit to the TSA. Airplanes have to be certified. The pilots have to be formation qualified. And then you come to the briefing day. There are thorough briefings, who will fly in which position and who will be on the ground coordinating. We even go so far as to time the person singing the national anthem, and they have them sing it 3 times and get an average of the time it will take, whether it's 1 minute 29 seconds or 1 minute 35. to let us know at what time we can expect to be there. To be there on time is the challenge, and it's, yes, not only were we in position, but were we on time. Of course, you go out and practice beforehand, and any excuse to fly, we're all right there.
On May 12, 1944, Günther Rall was commanding 75 fighters of JG-11, based at Wensdorf, 250 kilometers north of Frankfurt.
Early in the morning we got alert because the Germans had out in the North Sea ships, and they were on the same frequency like the 8th Air Force, the bombers. And when they tuned their radios, they could figure out we have to expect an attack and when and how. You know, we are a group of 75 airplanes, 2 Focke-Wulf, 190, and I was the top cover with a 109.
Patrolling at 33,000 feet, Rall's Staffel bounced a group of P-47s flying top cover for Zemke's squadron. Rall shot down one P-47. Then his 109 took hits, and his wingman was hit and bailed out.
So I was alone, and all the other ones were engaged with all different aircraft up there. Then they chased me, and this must have been the second. I attacked Hub Zemke's leading group.
Only years later did Zemke learn that his two wingmen were shot down by Germany's third highest scoring ace. Zemke dove to escape Rall's guns, and Rall himself was jumped by P-47s.
And they chased me, and we knew exactly the P-47 is much faster as a 109 in a dive, and had a much higher structural strength as a 109. But what can you do? I was chased by four, almost line abreast. And I turn left, I turn in the bullets. And I turn right, turn in the bullets, pull up, the bullets. So there was no other choice, and I went down and bang, 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 and all of a sudden, bang, and the thumb was off. So I pressed the stick between my legs. It was, I want to know how when I run in the bottom, you know.
At treetop level, Rall pulled up until his battered plane stalled.
From there on, the aircraft turned upside down. I was hanging out of my cockpit and made some instinctive movements to get rid of that airplane, because it was not easy to get out of a cockpit of the 109, even not if it's upside down.
At first, Rall was tumbling wildly and could not reach the parachute release.
And all of a sudden, it was quiet. I was looking how high, and I pulled until I was on the parachute. And then I recognized, I said, "Shorty, where's my thumb?" I came down and was hanging on a tree. You know, I landed in a wood. And it was good. There was no impact on the bottom, because 1 year earlier I had broken my back 3 times, and this was dangerous. And I solved my harness, fell down, and not on the bottom. It was a steep slope, you know, bump, 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 bump. Not a hard impact. But this is then when the farmers came, and I said, "I'm a German."
Conflicting combat reports from May 12th make it impossible to determine who shot down Günther Rall. The evidence suggests that it was probably Lieutenant Rankin or his wingman, Lieutenant Cleon Thornton. It was the 8th time Rall had been shot down.
I get used to it, and I like that. But this was my first bailout. My first and the last one.
The mission itself, tactically, was extremely successful. Whereas the bombers were losing 10, maybe as high as 15% of their aircraft on one mission, making it very hard to resupply 8th Air Force with new crews. The fighters were so successful in intercepting the Germans and breaking them up, it fell to 4%, a 4% loss, of which half of that is estimated to have been anti-aircraft.
Colonel Zemke was not entirely pleased with the mission.
This fan, he felt, failed. His generals thought it was just brilliant. He couldn't apply top cover. The first group, A group, he escorted out on the fan. They broke up into radiuses, and they were down to elements of 2. And when he got jumped by Günther Rall, there was just 2 of them there, and he was screaming for help. But he had staggered Gabreski 5 minutes behind him, and Gabreski was overwhelmed with the amount of Germans they had. I mean, they were breaking up German coveys, and they were going in all directions, and he could get no help.
The 56th employed the Zemke fan again on May 22nd, as its 3 16-plane squadrons fanned out ahead of the bombers. Each squadron this time had its own top cover. The group shot down 12 Germans. Zemke's squadron saw no German fighters at all. Colonel Zemke continued to innovate and refine tactics for bomber escort, ground attack, and dive bombing with P-47s.
We flooded Germany with tactics. This man helped shape these tactics. It needs to be pointed out, he didn't do it alone. It was the genius of many of his men coming up with these ideas and applying them to it.
Eligible for reassignment in late May, Lieutenant Rankin opted for a 50-hour extension with the 56th Fighter Group.
I wanted to do this because I thought something was going to happen. I figured D-Day, I didn't know what they were going to call it, but I wanted to be there and a part of that. Well, the 50 hours went by so fast. Just like that, you find 2 or 3 missions a day. And I didn't see it most of the time. I didn't have any action. I didn't get my last 50. It was the day after D-Day. I flew 3 missions on D-Day and did see a German fighter.
Lieutenant Rankin rotated home to the States in July 1944 after 75 combat missions and 10 aerial victories. Günther Rall's mangled hand was a long time healing. Continued infection kept him off flight status until November '44, when he took command of the Germans' new fighter unit leader school.
We had this unit with Allied aircraft. Yeah, and thirdly I flew them all. P-51, D-47, 38, Spitfire, as target for my own pilots, which I have to train. That was fantastic, and I'm still, this comes to my opinion that the best fighter airplane was the judging all the characteristics and criteria. The P-51 was the best one.
In August 1944, Colonel Zemke left the 56th to take command of the 479th Fighter Group. He gave command of the 56th to Dave Schilling. Zemke called all the men together.
He said he knew what he wanted to do, and he knew how he wanted it done. He expected, from the lowest rank to the highest rank, full compliance with everything there.
Zemke applied the tactics and discipline that had made the 56th a success.
The 56 had a record of 8-1. Nobody in the 8th Air Force was even close. And he told Dave, I will beat that 8-1 record, your tenure against mine. That was a challenge. And he let the 479th know that.
The 479th began flying missions deep into Germany. Under Zemke's leadership, they began to rack up scores and produce aces. During the airborne invasion of Holland in October 1944, the 479th had 27 victories and just 1 loss. By late October, Zemke had flown 153 combat missions and had 17 3/4 confirmed victories. Zemke was a highly effective yet enigmatic leader who was unable to motivate and manage those above him nearly as effectively as he did those under his command. He was reassigned to the 65th Fighter Wing as Chief of Staff. But first, he would fly one last combat mission with the 479th. On October 30th, while escorting a squadron of B-24s, Zemke's fighters were caught in a huge thunderstorm. Zemke's P-51 went into a spin and broke up. Zemke was thrown clear, still strapped in his seat, and parachuted into a swamp. He was captured, interrogated, and sent to Stalag Luft I in northeastern Germany, where he assumed command of more than 9,000 Allied POWs. His leadership improved conditions and morale, and ultimately saved the lives of thousands of POWs. Colonel Hub Zemke retired from the military in 1966 after several other successful commands, but it was the werewolf of Zemke's wolf pack that has left his indelible mark on history. When the war ended in Europe, Günther Rall returned home, packed a suitcase, kissed his wife, and walked into captivity. After a brief stay in England, he returned to Vienna and faded into civilian and family life. In 1954, Rall joined the new Luftwaffe as a major and flew jet fighters. He served as a chief of staff for NATO air forces before his retirement as a lieutenant general in 1975. A chance meeting in 1991 brought these three old adversaries together again, the beginning of deep and lasting friendships.
Günther Rall is coming over for Germany, and Hub Zemke is coming down here to the Costa Mesa, California, from his almond ranch in California. We would like you to come out here to be with them. We're going to do a painting of that particular mission on 12 May 44. Well, I said, fine, I'd love to come. So we'll pay your way, we'll do all that good stuff. So that was the first time I met Günther. We spent 5 good days together. We became friends immediately, and we have been friends ever since. And now, a couple of years back, he said, Shorty, I'll never shoot at you again.
A fighter pilot has a personal relation to his enemy. He sees him. It's man to man, where we had the real dogfights in Russia, because you could see his face. So we respected each other. He fought for his country, I fought for his country, and we had personal contact in the air. So you have a personal relationship, and this is that the fighter pilots after the war became friends. It's typical.
I'm a very emotional guy for a fighter pilot, I'll tell you, but I love this country, and every young person who lives here ought to be blessed to know that they've been so fortunate to be born here. And when the time comes, if you have to do your thing for your country, you better damn well step up to the bat and do it. See, anybody who's so fortunate, he feels the same about his country. 3 wars and I'm still here. I'm 88. I feel fine. I'd go to tomorrow and fight, but I wouldn't fight against Günther.
Colonel Zemke's attitude toward his enemies was shaped by his interrogation and imprisonment.
When he came out of that camp and was liberated, my father, who's of German parents, hated Germans. He had suffered. And I think for a long period of time, he held that grudge. He went back to Germany and he met Bahr, Priller, Günther Rall, a number of the German fighter pilots that he knew he fought against. And he opened up more and more to them. And my father's whole view of Germans and the Luftwaffe slowly changed.
In 2006, Günther Rall published his autobiography, My Logbook. Kurt Bratz was his editor and publisher.
I remember one evening after a hard day of work when we were working on the biography, and we sat right here on under the porch, both of us with a glass of whiskey in our hands, and didn't speak for a couple of minutes. And suddenly, into the silence, he said, you know what? I looked into the faces of most of the guys I had to kill, and tears ran down his face. And I said, why so? And he said, you know, the air war on the Eastern Front took place in altitudes below 5,000, 10,000 feet. Nobody wore an oxygen mask. And when you engaged, you came across the guy before you turned in. And I could see them, and a minute later they were dead. And that was something that surprised me really, because at first glance, he's just a cool-cut warrior, you know. But if you get to know him a bit better, and not only him, this might be true for most of the World War, or many of the World War II veterans, it really bothers them and will bother them till they do their last breath.